Yes.
Forspoken was announced as Project Athia alongside the
Yes.
PS5, and it got delayed, I think, 4 times. Like, we've been seeing little tidbits and trailers and updates. Like, it's definitely understandable that I think some of its release was hampered by, I don't know, like, hype fatigue. Like, it got kind of stretched out there. Meanwhile, last week, out of the blue, during the sort of developer direct, Microsoft was like, hey, Shinji Mikami's studio, Tango Gameworks, has a brand new game. It's called Hi-Fi Rush. It's super colorful, cartoony. It's a rhythm-based beat 'em up. It's out now. Check it out. It's on Game Pass. It's on PC. Go nuts. And apparently, it is, despite being on Game Pass and, you know, people just checking it out and having no marketing whatsoever, it is outselling Forspoken on PC, which is kind of... I mean, that sucks for Forspoken.
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't want to, like, sort of just be like, let's make these games fight each other. They're nothing alike. Like, make them fight. But, like, it is really interesting to see that comparison of, like, one has pretty long tail of people knowing what it is. And, you know, again, it's this big, huge AAA presentation. And it's, you know, this big, sprawling open world. And this is, like, a colorful, cartoony beat 'em up that just was, like, surprise launched out of the blue.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know.
I played a little bit of Hi-Fi Rush. I finished the first chapter, and it definitely gives me those Saturday morning cartoon vibes that you know we all grew up on and loving. And like it's got that kind of zany kind of story. The action is fun. It's got rhythm-based combat, which some people kind of roll their eyes at, but they did a really good job with kind of nailing that to where even if you're not on beat, you're still doing the same amount of damage. You're not penalized for not being on beat, but you're also not rewarded. I think the biggest thing for me with this is some of the dialogue is it's fine, but it's also kind of mirrors some of the stuff that we got in those teasers and trailers for Forspoken that people were hating on, but I don't see none of the hate for Hi-Fi Rush for some reason. But you know, it's corny, but it's a lot of fun. The music is great. You know, it's got some Nine Inch Nails in there. I forget what
that was a
other tracks
surprising
I've seen.
needle drop.
Yeah.
By the way, I was not expecting that. No, I totally get what you're saying. I think that there's a lot to unpack there in terms of like there is, I think, a tipping point with kind of exposure fatigue when it comes to seeing a video game X amount of times to the point where it just becomes like a thing where you're like, all right, I'm over it, versus that strike while the iron's hot, or you didn't know the iron existed 5 minutes ago, which is what happened with Hi-Fi Rush. And so I think like Forspoken kind of reached that Deathloop territory of like, okay, just put the game out already. But yeah, I was a little surprised because like the second we saw Hi-Fi Rush, I think the character was like, so you're probably wondering how I got here. And I was like, oh man, we were all dunking on Forspoken for that exact level of dialogue a couple weeks ago. But also context is everything, right? Like this
100%.
is more of a, you know, Saturday morning cartoon. It's fully self-aware. It's comedic. It's got like the kind of animation chops of something like Spider-Verse. It's fully like, all right, we're goofy and we're slapstick. But I also never really, and I haven't this is just through consuming marketing. I haven't really seen Forspoken as like this gritty, serious thing to me either. That was like the second you were like a girl from New York City goes to a wizard land to fight monsters. I was like, okay, well that's a little, you know, self-aware. It's a little tongue in cheek too. So yeah, it was interesting watching the disparity between these very different but somewhat similar properties kind of hit around the same time.
Yeah,
I think there's something to be said for sort of how it's not uncanny valley, but it's sort of how people respond as how something is presented. And
yes,
I think of
100%.
sort of some weird examples of that is like, I remember prior to like Borderlands was originally going to have like a drab, somewhat realistic aesthetic supposedly. And then I think either Fallout came out or they just were like, let's try it cell shaded. And like, that's become like its own, you know, completely identifiable you know, aesthetic. One that I always sort of go to is like, people hate Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They're like, this is stupid. This is over the top. And me and like maybe 4 or 5 people that I know love The Adventures of Tintin, which Spielberg also did, and it's got the same level of over the top set pieces. But nobody dunks on that one for being like too out there and over the top because it's a cartoon.
Yep.
Whereas like, and it's all some's got performance capture with CG animation and some has real people with CG animation. It's all this sort of, you're playing with the same bits and pieces, and it's just sort of what does the final product look like and how are people going to compare it? And you know, you have something that's really pushing for photorealism like Forspoken, and it's got these like, you know, gorgeous, lavish costumes, and it's got these incredible, you know, this scenic vistas, and
the
it's
spell effects and the particles and everything are just way over the top. Yeah.
And like, there's part of your brain that's like, I want to take this seriously. Like, I want to treat this like, you know, realism. And, you know, then you look at something that's totally, you know, cartoony and colorful and over the top. And like, I think there's a world where like, if Tango Gameworks had made a game that was like has the color palette and the shaders of something like Evil Within. Like if that's like a bleak cyberpunk dystopia where you're still beating stuff up to a rhythm, I think people would be like, it's surprisingly funny. Or like the tone it's kind of weirdly upbeat. And it's right. I don't know, people I guess aren't doing that with Forspoken, but I don't know. I think people they want things to be easily identifiable and quantifiable. They want to be able to sort of be like, I know what this is. And when something sort of upsets that, I saw a thing going around that made my head hurt where it was like, someone please explain to TikTok what horror comedy is, because people are like, the menu isn't scary, it's too funny. People are like, are people really scared of Megan? And it's like, no, they're horror. It's also funny. It's like two things can be two things at once. And it's, I don't know. Yeah. The sort of tone we're expecting from games is, all over the place, because sometimes you get Borderlands and sometimes you get The Last of Us. Like they can go different directions, and you can't necessarily get a feel for what the vibe's going to be by how they look. Yep. So if you enjoyed that, check out full episodes of Beyond, IGN's PlayStation shows. We goof around about everything PlayStation related, sometimes covering it seriously. New episodes drop every Tuesday on IGN.com or YouTube.com/IGN Games.